Hey everybody, I've got camera in my way.
Where are
I'm
you,
Carson Grubaugh.
Carson? Are you wearing space goggles?
I do feel like I'm in a spaceship here, but this is like ensuring better quality picture of the book.
The thing that you're looking for.
Yeah, and this is Sean Robinson joining me
Hi.
as always, and this is Living the Line. Today we're going to look at Dark Horse's new deluxe edition of Blade of the Immortal, Volume One. I've got all three of them, but anything that we talk about in Volume One, we would talk about with all of them. So I do really love like with the Berserk books, I really love the design and production of these books with like the leather, and this one has like some foil put in, and then almost like a little color book plate tipped in, which is really
Uh-huh.
nice, and that's consistent. It's just nice to have the consistent design. um, but there's a lot of things about production. And again, these are things, we'll preface it by saying this, we don't think this is Dark Horse being lax. This is what they're provided with. But there's a lot of things with production that are odd in this.
Yeah, interesting
And
to talk about at the very
yeah.
least. So, Hiroaki Samura is a really interesting cartoonist. He debuted in 1993 with this particular story, and he was actually cherry picked from the art school that he was working at the studying at the time. He was apparently an oil painter in the
Mm.
oil painter track, and you get to see some of his oil paintings in the covers of some of the monthly books. And unlike a lot of manga, this was actually came out fairly close to the originally came out fairly close to the initial publication. This came out from Dark Horse. It was produced by Studio Proteus in 1996, and the letterer and the translation was all by the Studio Proteus team. And the lettering, look, you see that Bacam right there, just absolutely fantastic English lettering by oh, and now I'm blanking on her name. She's a fantastic letterer. She was the
Dana Lewis.
no
Translation
Dana,
is Torrance Smith and Dana Lewis.
yeah,
Lettering and retouches by Wayne Truman and
and
Tomoko Saito.
right, Tomoko Saito, who also designed the logo there, which is
Okay.
for me one of the classic
Yeah.
logos from this time period. And Tomoko Saito is a fantastic letterer. She's actually from Japan. She was a Japanese national, and she married Torrance Smith, who was the head of Studio Proteus. And I think she's a great letterer, and you see a lot of her work on these first few pages. So we're reading left to right, Carson.
Yeah, we are reading like Americanized. And I think that's one of the things that we want to talk about is, as far as I've heard and understood, instead of flipping the page, like taking the whole page and just flipping it to make it more
Mhm.
easily read by Americans, like they would cut this panel was over here, they would cut it out and move it over here and put that one over there for the most part. But there's certain places where they couldn't do that, and I've scanned, and we'll look at one of those when we switch over to looking at some scans, where because of some of his compositions that just doesn't work. And
Yeah,
so it leads to really bad storytelling moments. Not that his storytelling was bad, but
no,
that there's bad storytelling. The other difficulty, something that I think makes the book stand out and be beautiful, but a lot of his images are finished, well, entirely finished in pencil, or you'll get these big, I mean, this was another thing that when I first was exposed to this book, everyone was talking about, oh, these big, cool, yeah, they're more like paintings, but he'll draw in ink, and then color in with pencil a little bit. Or like on the this first sequence here, which is what I scanned, this first page, it's this is all pencil. This illustration of Manji, the main character, is all pencil, and then you have 3 ink panels and 2 totally pencil panels. So that I think this is a good follow-up to last week, because they had to use the halftone process. Unfortunately, when they blew these up, I don't think they re-halftone them for the new
right.
size. So to my eye, they look less like pencil here than what I remember seeing when I was first picking up that very first little Dark Horse Tankobon size piece. And so the ink work looks really nice in here, but the half toning, the dots are extremely visible because I think they just used those same negatives and blew them up.
Right, and that's my exact theory as well. So like we were saying, the English lettering in here is really exceptional, and my guess is that the reason this is not just presented in right to left format now, like so many newer releases is because they wanted to preserve that really fantastic original lettering. And my guess is that however it was transferred before, Torrin Smith, who, by the way, died about 10 years ago now, I believe, um, was a real stickler for reproduction. And he was really one of the first guys to not only, adapt manga into English, but also to really insist on high production standards. And he just insisted I have to have full-size copies of the negatives. All my letterers have to work, at the blown-up size that the original artwork was created so that they can do a good enough job that they can, as good a job as they can. And so all of these elements were created on paper at size of the original art. And my guess is that whenever Dark Horse produced the first small edition, that's when they finally scanned these elements digitally. And they haven't gone back to those original physical elements to do this new edition. They've just blown up those original scans. And so
Interesting, given what you're talking about the lettering, that this page has the original lettering.
that would be very interesting to see what
If
the
that's in the original Dark Horse printing or not. I don't know. I really like that. I'm going to continue to advocate for. I know they did all this work, but from here on out, just let the beautiful calligraphy speak for itself. Like, I don't know what to need to know what that says. I get the idea. I don't
yeah
read
what
lettering I don't read sound effects anyways, really.
yeah, and we should talk about. I mean, if you haven't read this book, I mean, especially the early volumes are very, very exciting, and a lot of stuff actually happens. This guy Manji is an immortal warrior. He's been cursed or blessed, depending on your perspective, with a body that's not going to give out because of these worms, these blood worms that live inside of him, and basically,
Yeah, right here you can see them like healing up his head.
yeah, they knit his body back together after injury. And as you find out through the early parts of the series, it's a pain in the ass. It hurts really bad. It makes his swordsmanship worse and worse. His name, Manji, is also the word for that swastika-like symbol that you just saw right there in the way that he killed that person. He wears that symbol on his back. It's a Buddhist symbol, and it is the reverse of the Nazi swastika, which is part of the reason why the book was not just mirror reversed in the first place, as the artist was concerned with the fact that this, Buddhist Shinto symbol would suddenly be a reversed, Nazi symbol instead.
I make a very big deal about that, like up here, and I think this is standard in all of the collections, is like the swastika, and they make a big deal about at the request of the author. We tried to avoid mirroring it and the sound effects and dialogue. So all of this was at the request of the artist.
Right. Back in 1995, whenever this was being negotiated the first time. That was, and if your option was to not read it or to read it, that would be, you'd rather read it than not read it, right? And how far have you read in this series? So this represents the first 3 volumes. Personally, Carson, how far have you read?
Oh, I've read the whole series.
Yeah.
I've always loved this series. I remember it was something that I went and met some other artist that was local, some guy that wanted to do books together. And I went and met him at the local comic shop when, he was like probably 20 and I was like 16 or 17. And we were just going to work on a book together. And he had the first Dark Horse, Tankobon version and showed me that. It's like, holy crap. And yeah, so I've always loved this series. am super excited that it's in the big format, and that's why I'm buying these. So I've read this all the way through. It's a great series, like straight to the end. I think at some point Dark Horse was just releasing them as monthly issues towards the
Yeah,
end of the run.
the first 150 or so came out as monthly issues, and they would like change the name slightly so that they were soliciting a number one or whatever. But basically, they ran just 150 installments, and I was reading it in that form for many, many years. I was obsessed with it in 1996. A lot of my friend group were obsessed with it. I remember one of the first comics I ever collaborated with somebody else on as a professional artist now, Jared Hodges, who ended up working for Tokyo Pop a couple years later. He was working on something that his friend Kevin called Bandage Man. It was basically a ripoff of this. And I did some extremely poor inking on a few pages, totally
Well,
ruined.
that'll be good when we do the recreation. You can bring that skill back. Yeah, this is probably the first manga that I read. And maybe so something I wanted to talk about this, and this is the perfect page for it. It maybe skewed my impression of what manga was. And I've been sent, the more and more exposed to manga I get, the more and more surprised I am. And you telling me that he was in an art school and a painter
Yeah.
maybe solves some of the question. I have always been very surprised that most manga does not look like traditional Japanese art to me. It seems to lose the calligraphy. Like people like Alex Raymond to me are calligraphic artists. I
Yeah.
don't see many artists in Japan that are calligraphic. They're very finicky. They go in and they color everything in and it's stiff lines. And I mean, even going back to like Tezuka or someone like that who is very calligraphic, it doesn't seem like it comes out of the Japanese tradition to me
Yeah.
at all. Um, this being my first exposure, this is a very like Japanese looking style, and they even have like a hokusai print in here. And a lot of the what we're going to try and figure out today is how they get the look of these lines, which is standard in the Japanese woodblock print.
Yeah,
So
Hiroaki Samura has a really characteristic line, which is interesting since he has so much pencil work. His ink work is so fantastic, but yeah, he's working for a monthly publication as opposed to a weekly publication. I think that makes a difference too. This was being published in Afternoon, which is a monthly large format magazine. And you see almost all of the elements that are going to spin out over the next few thousand pages in these first sections here. So Manji meets Rin, whose parents have been killed by the Ito Ryo.
this is the Ito Ryo here killing her parents.
Right, and it's funny. He just makes a few drawings of the Ito Ryo here, and he's going to be beholden to them for the next couple hundred pages because he sort of
Yeah.
spins out each one of these dudes individually.
But they're a new sword school that's like fuck all the old ways, like all that matters winning. Like old school tradition would say, you can only use one sword, and they're like fuck that, if two swords helps you win, use two swords. And
Right.
they're trying to take over, and so they kill Rin's parents, and Rin and Manji get together, and the whole thing's like a big revenge story, and he has to kill a certain amount of people before he's released from the blessing curse of the worms, right? That's
right. The thousand bad men to make up for the 100 good men that he's killed.
Yeah. And I think that what I like about the artwork is the same thing that's going on in the story. Is there's the clash of the old tradition and the new, and there's something kind of punk rock about it where he is using new pins and new techniques, but there is this this mix up of pencil and all this stuff. But there are these kind of marks, like especially when he draws the kimonos, that look like old Japanese woodblocks. And I have a number of examples that we'll look at on the computer. And I think I know, when we do the recreation, I have a guess about what he's using to get that look. We'll see if it works. I saw another artist on Monbin do this. It's not just because like we'll talk about that more when we do the recreation. But I love that mashup of the old and new, and it's punk rock, and it's because of that, like he's gonna live forever. I think on the reread, now being older, I've only reread this first volume so far, but there seems to be a lot of like existentialism in here,
Hmm.
like this crisis about the value of life and why would one want to live forever, and there's things like that that I found fulfilling now that I'm older and I want a little more than just like people chopping each other up.
Right.
Uh, so there is all the people chopping each other up, but
Well,
there's more.
yeah, and all the different characters have this kind of, you know, are exponents of a different type of death, in my estimation. Oh, that's a hell of a panel. I don't remember that at all. Oh, the painter. Oh, see,
Yeah,
I should just say I read the hell out of these back when they came out in 1996, and at some point I got rid of all of this. So, you know, I've kept myself fresh.
yeah. This is like probably a scan of a painting that he half-toned and then did like, he took like some white out on top of it. But he's again referencing like the connection between the Japanese calligraphy and painting, ink drawing and swordsmanship. He has this
Right.
ex-swordman with a brush at the end of his sword, painting. And so there's this real reverence for tradition, but then this kind of total overthrowing of tradition too. And
Right. And the Ito Rio, like I was saying, each of them are exponents of um, a different type of embrace of that tradition. Like basically, since the only thing that matters is the quality of their swordsmanship, anything goes. Each one of them, they're like the loosest possible conglomeration you can imagine. Each one of them have their own kind of like perverse relationship with the sword or the weapon that they have. um, and it gives a lot of like flavor to um, something that might feel a little bit more monster of the week otherwise.
yeah, it's not monster of the week because they interact with each other throughout the whole series.
Right.
Like this is a revenge story that takes place over however many thousands of pages, and it's not like that he beats that character once and they disappear. There's certain people that come in and
Right.
out of the story. Here's one where he's doing watercolor or ink wash.
Yeah.
So that was the thing that when this was first introduced to me, it was like, look at this cool thing where this guy's doing these beautiful pencil drawings. And uh, they have some interviews with him. It's
So the
unfortunate that they have black and white prints of his oil painted covers, but
Yeah, which are fantastic, by the way.
yeah.
That might be the infamous interview where he admits that uh, he paid somebody to get through his finals and paint a bunch of his paintings for him.
I don't know. I don't think so.
There's
Maybe
a
it's like one page.
there's an early Dark Horse interview. It was done with one of the translators where he let something like that fly.
I
Maybe
mean, we're
not.
famous manga artists now. What are they gonna do? Take away the degree? Like, who
He didn't
cares?
get a degree because he was headhunted um, while he was in school.
Oh, well, then even less concern.
There's a
Like,
great
I didn't even get a degree. What are you gonna do? Take it away from me? But he
the
is a fantastic artist. I mean, look at this
yeah, I mean, unbelievable. Yeah.
beautiful image, the use
three
of tones and composition, and
3 pages back, there's a headshot of Rin that has a on the bottom. There you go. That has some of those lines you were talking about, and a fairly
yeah, these indicative marks. I think they're done with chopsticks, basically. And Sean and I are gonna try that out. And not
we're-
because I'm being like, oh, he's Asian, he's got chopsticks, but because I saw a guy on Monbin, Urasawa's Monbin, which I've now completed, watching all of it, and like, God, it's such a treasure trove. But there was a guy drawing with chopsticks, and I said, that's that look. So not being racist. Here's another one. It could be a brush, but some of the marks are just, I can't imagine.
yeah.
It could just be like a calligraphy brush, a
I,
Japanese traditional brush that I'm just not used
that's
to.
the other thing I wanted to. That's the other thing I want to try when we'll do it at the end. I'll show you. There's a sort of squared technique that you can use if you're using a brush in a traditional calligraphic fashion. You have it more upright than you would
Yeah.
in a drawing fashion, and if you do kind of smush it down, you can get a kind of squared off look. I was doing a drawing yesterday where I got that, a fairly dramatic one like
Well,
that.
maybe you should do most of your recreation with the brush, and I'll try try the chopsticks if you've got them, just because that's fun. But
Yeah,
maybe we should try them with different techniques
yeah,
and
we'll
see
try
what
them with different
happens.
tools.
Okay, here's the sequence that I tagged that was a nightmare of storytelling because of this weird, um, like not mirroring the page, but cutting the pieces and going out. So
Yeah,
this character walks up and he's on Manji's left, and he walks past him and sits down on his right. And he's on his right, he's on his right. And then you get to this, and without the character moving, all of a sudden he's to
yeah,
Manji's left
yeah.
for a number of pages. Um, and then he's back on his right again. And throughout this sequence, yeah, he has to be to his right because he's holding up the sword with the right hand. But there's a like he flip flops somewhere in the middle to being to
Yeah.
the left for a while. I don't know if the character's supposed to get up and walk because there are swords over on his right, but I think that's due to the like some of the
Uh-huh.
paddles are just cut and moved, and some of them are actually reversed depending on the composition.
Depending on the way that the balloons flow. And so a lot of times, like a panel like at the top left there, they were able to just swap which balloon has the which text.
That was
Um,
something else I was
yeah,
thinking about, is what a lettering nightmare that would be,
totally.
where in Japan you would read like this,
Right,
but you'd have to like take all of this chunk of dialogue that was here and like
right. And they re-engineer the
which word.
text.
Yeah, you're switching, like this should have been here and this should have been
Exactly
here.
right.
And so depending on how much they say, like if this one is just like this, and then this one is blah 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 blah, that could be really difficult.
And it
So I
presents,
did notice a lot of times the lettering really hugs up on the word balloons in uncomfortable way. Like here, it's really
right.
packed in there, and there it has a lot of room. And I thought, God, what a challenge that must have been for the letterer. And I mean, it's pretty readable.
Yeah. And there are occasionally acting issues because of that too, when they flopped the, where the text is appearing and the character doesn't seem to be responding to the right moment. Um, and
Oh, yeah.
and then there were just problems outright where you read the balloons in the wrong order because they're not in the right place to lead your eye.
Yeah, they're like down instead of up, and
Exactly.
yeah. So that's not something I remember struggling with too much when I was reading it as it was coming out, but in this one, probably just because I'm paying more attention to it for like I got to put some sticky tabs to make this
Well,
episode interesting.
you're also 40 years old with 20 more, years of
Yeah,
experience making and
20,
looking at
25
comics.
more years potentially.
Right.
Just a couple other things before we switch over to the screen. Some of the comments, well, actually, this is the kind of stuff I'm surprised I don't see more of in manga. Is these beautiful calligraphic things that reference the simplicity. And to me, what's so good about, especially Chinese and Japanese ink drawing, is it's a different type of abstraction than Western abstraction. Western abstraction tends to go towards the iconic, and the Eastern stuff tends to go to the essence.
Right.
And so you won't get like a
Specificity.
repeat, like it won't be a M for a bird. Like what I mean by iconic is like we would come up with like the phone icon. So we're going to draw a bird, we draw an M. If someone doing like an Asian ink drawing draws a bird, it's a different bird every time, but they're still very abstracted and linguistic. It's just not like a linguistic stamp. Um, and I'm surprised I don't see more of that in the manga. Like images like that really, to me, get to that essential abstraction.
Uh, part of it might just be the economics of production, where if you have a weekly series, the calligraphic aspects are tied to a particular person's hand as opposed to something that can be reproduced by an assistant. I'm
Yeah,
going
but
to
you'd
do it.
also think like going faster would be beneficial. And I see a lot of stuff where it looks like they go back and I mean, watching the Monben, you see some of them do it. They go like tediously tighten up and fill in lines that started out pretty loose. I mean, some of them draw so fast, it's like I don't even understand how they're doing it. Stuff like that, though. I think this is just one of the things that people freaked out about this series. They always talk about is these beautiful spreads, and I didn't know he was a painter, so you can see it. He's making
Yeah.
paintings there.
Do you think that this has been influential? I'm curious because it was, of course, very popular. But the only things that I've really seen that have carried over into other things is that there are a few copycat artists who have taken his facial stylization. The guy who did Eden is one example of that.
Yeah, you would
Japanese
think for
artist.
how popular it was over here, you would see more influence, and I don't know how popular it was in Japan, but I really don't. I don't. But who knows? Who knows? Like what we're actually exposed to and what we aren't.
Yeah.
Uh, yeah, I don't know. It seems like one of those like Akira, Blade of the Immortal,
Hmm.
Appleseed. It's in that to me in that ranks of like the big ones, at least over here, and no, I don't see it, especially those peculiar marks, which I'm so interested in trying to figure out. I don't see a lot of that. And the broken contours, like a
Yeah.
lot of the manga I see has very close, like you're talking about Berserk has these very close contours that lend itself well to animation.
Right. This is
Uh,
the opposite of that.
yeah, most manga that I see has like these very tightly closed off, no gaps. So like if I paint bucket fill it, it will paint bucket fill really, but they don't even use colors. So I
Right.
don't get it. I don't get that tendency over there. This panel I just tagged it because it has that like existential aspect to it where she says never dying means always having to live no matter what the pain of existence. Who would on earth would want that? And I resonate with that. It's like I'm not suicidal or anything, but like the day to day of life, as cool and fascinating as my life has been, as many great opportunities I had, the day to day is still pretty much a pain in the ass. And the idea of living forever and dealing with the pain in the ass forever is pretty daunting. Uh,
That,
so I like that because most
that
people think, oh, if I could live forever, that'd be great.
Rin is an especially well drawn character, I'd say. You know, you current context, you might think strong woman. That this is like she's like a type or like an exponent of a type. But I think that she's actually a real individual, and that she has definitive goals and thinks that she knows how she's going to reach those goals, but is influenced by the people around her. Um, her and Manji have a really fascinating relationship through the series, and I find their relationship to be rather touching, and it's an interesting contrast to some of the sort of
Yeah, actually,
nihilistic.
this is the perfect page for that because it's he was responsible for the death of his own sister, correct?
Right.
At the
Well,
beginning, I think,
in a way,
in a
and
way.
he killed
And
her husband, and drove her insane, and then
yeah,
she's killed by, yeah,
and so he really views Rin as a sister. But
a
then
second chance.
in this sequence, she offers to sleep with him, and he kind of just laughs at her, and he's like, "I'd be too much for a young lady like you, sweet 16 and all." And she's really like taken aback by this, and he's like, besides you spent all these years just practicing your swordsmanship. Hell, I figured that you never even held hands with anyone besides your dad. And then she tries to like do the little like, I don't know, pensive, cute, sexy like
Right.
look
Seductive.
here. Yeah, like drawn away to draw you in by closing yourself off, seductive thing. And then she looks at him and she's like, "Don't I even look a little bit grown up?" And he just cracks up and he's like, "Come on, girl." And he's telling her like she's too skinny. You got a body like a bark twig, and like if a kid like you with a body like a bark twig could make herself sexy just by letting her hair down, and then she gets mad at him and calls him a creep, but it's like she was the one initiating the. Yeah, so there is a sweet relationship between them because of that big brother, young sister, but they're not related, so there's
No,
like these moments of tension.
I think that he sees her as a second chance with his sister, like basically that he had done wrong before, and now it's his time to do right. Um, which is another theme that carries through some of this, and
Well, it's a good counterpoint to the revenge and redemption at the same time.
right, and he tries to persuade her against revenge almost continually, even while aiding her.
Yeah, yeah, and it's like through helping her get revenge, he gets redemption. But he knows that that's one of the. I almost wanted to recreate that one because to me that's an iconic image. It has the marks, but they're less obvious. And the action in this, like the drawings are fantastic. Everything about it. So let's switch over to look at some of the. First, I wanted to look at two artists that are what I'm talking about when I talk about the woodblock, especially, but also some of the ink drawing. So Hokusai is mentioned in the book. They actually recreate a Hokusai piece, and here you get that look of the line where it like blobs off real quick. I'm assuming, I don't know if this doesn't look like a woodblock. Could be, but that's a Hokusai image. This is supposedly a Hokusai ink drawing. So there's that type of line. And I think that would have been made with the type of brush that you're going to use.
Or a reed pen that's cut to a slight angle. Like we should talk about pen types sometime. That to me looks like a reed pen. And so you're talking about a reed that's split like a nib, but then in this case has got a squared off edge. And so you can use the corner of the squared off edge for the fine lines, and the squared off aspect of it comes into play when you want a thick line or when you turn. So if you're turning with something that's squared off like that, you get this sort of abrupt wood looking mark.
So maybe he's using one of those then in the things that I'm looking at.
It's possible.
I think this is the Hokusai that he recreates in there, actually.
That one right there on the upper right. Yeah.
Yeah, this is recreated in the book. So that type of this type of mark making is the type of thing that I'm surprised I don't see in more manga, and that he does really well. Okay, Sean, you didn't know Yoshi Toshi.
No.
Check these out.
Huh.
So another very famous Japanese woodblock artist. I think he's later than Hokusai. Not contemporary, like not someone that's still alive. But just compositionally amazing stuff. And I see a lot of that same line work. So these would have been wood blocks. All of this would have been basically like a stamp. Like they carved into wood to make a stamp. And each color that you see on here is a different chunk of wood with a different stamp carved into it. And then they have to somehow align it all and print it. And
all the blocks are cut at precise size, and they have a way of doing the registration, as in aligning them by having them in some type of vise. So basically, you've got like a physical registration. There's people who can still do this stuff, and so we still know procedure from it.
But God, it's impressive. And I was telling Sean before we started that I worked at Michael's craft store in Southfield, Michigan, a little suburb of Detroit. And this guy came in. These are from Yoshitoshi's 100 Aspects of the Moon. So you'll see the moon is in all of them. So there's 100 of these, and this guy had collected, I think it was 71 of them. And he brought in, I don't think it was the full 70 he brought in because he didn't have enough money to frame them all. But I framed like 30 or 40 of these things, the original wood blocks. They weren't like recreation prints or anything. And they were on these flimsy little rice paper, and I've never been more scared in my life, but they were gorgeous. None of these would have an example of it, but there were maybe right here. There were certain instances where he was printing like a matte black and a gloss black. So like a kimono would be printed all black, and then these little patterns would be printed gloss black on top of the matte black. I mean, just these exquisite things. So there's this history in Japan of these just amazing tradition of work that I don't see much in manga. Like I see in Lone Wolf and Cub, you get this. Maybe it's just the stuff we're getting doesn't show it, but Frank Miller picks up on all this stuff
Right.
and runs with it. But
Yeah.
I don't see it, at least in modern manga. I don't see much of it, and it's a bit of a bummer.
And so even though these are wood blocks, the reason that those are still very calligraphic lines is that those would have been either done as a preliminary drawing or done directly on a block maybe, and then cut away in so as to represent the character of that line. So
I always
even
wondered if it was something about the woodblock process that having like the thicker line, because you got to imagine you have a piece of wood and you cut out everything but the line. That's a really thin piece of wood. So I always wondered if like the reason those capped off thicker was like structural,
I don't think
but
so. I think it's in
you of the
imitation
ink.
of the ink. Yeah.
Yeah,
So we're talking like a squared off reed pen is my guess there, and yeah, so this is an imitation of the preliminary drawing.
the reed pen look. Okay,
Mhm.
yeah, beautiful stuff. So his work obviously pays homage to that tradition. All right, just a couple quick things on the computer talking about reproduction. So here's that opening sequence that you're talking about with the priest, and you get those couple pencil,
The faux priest.
the faux priest. Yeah. Okay, this is only like 25% of the 1200 DPI scan, and you can already see the halftone like really bad on these.
Right.
Um, and this is where I was saying I think like Dark Horse just blew up what they already had.
Mhm.
Like if they were going to blow the book up, and I don't have a problem with the halftone process because what I remember is it looked like pencils.
Right.
Um, but
Yeah.
when you like double the size of the image and you don't halftone it, all of a sudden the dots are more visible to the eye.
Right. And I think probably that they just would have been a larger production uh, if they had gone back to whatever their original format is. My guess is that this is just simply to produce, to keep the original English lettering without having to basically go back from scratch.
When you'd have to go back and I mean, I think there's going to be 7 of these deluxe editions eventually with like 500 pages each. You'd have to go back and rescan every pencil drawing. Yeah, and then re-letter them. And I'm assuming these were hand lettered at the
Yeah,
time, yeah.
yeah.
So you'd
So,
have to like go and make a font of
mm,
uh
well, you could lift it from this and then drop it into the new page. And that would
yeah,
probably be
okay.
worth doing if the licensor has better files, especially if you were going to do the right to left and really make it a new edition of it. I mean, it
Well, but
seems
if
like
the artist wants it to not be right to left for whatever reason,
no. I
I
mean,
don't know. I mean,
I
I
think he would have been
assume
fine with it being right to left. It's just that it wouldn't have been able to be published in 1996 right to left.
American audiences wouldn't read it.
Yeah,
So
what
sorry,
Torrin
go ahead.
Smith had said at the time was that basically Dark Horse's marketing told them that it was something like 35% or 40% of the audience um, was all that would basically that they'd be cutting their audience to like somewhere between a half and a third of what it would be if they insisted on having it be right to left.
That's probably accurate. I mean, thank goodness that's changed.
Yeah.
So here, speaking of the right to left, I wanted to go in because this is a sequence really early on in the book as well, where you can see by not flipping this panel, this is like the way it was originally drawn, the character's grabbing it with his right hand, and you preserve his original composition. Then what they would have done is in Japan, this still would have been in the middle, but these panels would have been over here and these would have been over here. So they cut and pasted it. So I did that, like I cut and pasted it. And when I did that, I noticed that that doesn't work because this panel like extends out and goes off the page, but this one has to line up and that one doesn't line up. And so they didn't fit. Like here, they fit underneath that just fine. And here it didn't line up. And I was thinking, what in the hell happened? So you can tell then that to make that work, these two panels actually did have to get cut out and mirrored. And so you wind up with what looks like a left hand
Right.
grabbing the sword, and then he's in the next panel, he's pulling it out with his right. So really, I think what the original page probably looked like. Let's cut this out and paste it real quick. I'm assuming that these two panels here were flipped.
Yep.
And that this is what the original page looked like.
100%.
And so from like reproduction standpoint, they weren't able to fully keep they weren't, because of his composition, they weren't fully able to keep his request to just cut these and move them over here. They had to actually mirror some of the panels. So really, if we were to get this in the standard tradition of like just mirroring the whole page, you would get, the page would have showed up like this to
Right.
the American audience rather than this.
Well, notice how different that is as well. When you're reading it, left to right, and you've got the mirror reversed one, his eye is going off of that initial panel. So like that first panel there, we are seeing he's suspicious of a thing that's happening basically on the next page. Like we are with him, whereas he's opposed to us when we're seeing it otherwise. It's a really interesting.
This guy.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and here, like he's continuing to face the same way, whereas in the way it actually showed up, like, well, I mean, I guess he is continuing to face it. It creates motion that way.
It's a different experience.
To me, basically, this is more awkward because he's moving off the page. So this actually, to me, works a little better.
Yeah, I'm saying that, like, that choosing not to mirror it is a mistake. Either mirror it or keep it right to left, but like, don't have this sort of half, whatever. We're rehashing decisions that were made, almost 20 years ago.
Yeah, so it's just weird. And like, again, there were, especially because of that symbol, I don't know which way it's supposed to go, but there's good reasons for that. And especially because there's so much swordsmanship, it would be weird to have a world where everyone's left-handed. So I get that, but then you get these weird things where it's like a left hand and a right hand because of so anyway, it's a interesting complication of translating. We're not complaining about it. Overall, this book it's really, really well done. My only problem is the big dots on the halftones, but again, I'm probably like the only person who even noticed that. So now we're gonna go and we're gonna try and figure out how to recreate those lines. So thanks for following along with us on this, and check back later in the week and see if drawing with chopsticks works or if Sean will beat me with his brush techniques.
We'll see. All right. See you soon.
You want to see all these books? Smash that subscribe button and the like button and the bell, and then you get them.